Hey, welcome to the Healthy Postnatal Body Podcast with your postnatal expert, Peter Lapp. That, as always, would be me. This is the podcast for the 9th of March 2025. And date before music means I have a guest on. Today I'm talking to Ayo Haynes. She's an open adoption advocate. We're talking everything open adoption. And I know a lot of countries only do open adoption, UK being one of them. So I think if you're listening in the States, you might think, I'm interested. And in the UK, you're thinking, why would I listen to this? Because we're discussing many more things. We're talking the biological surprise, how you can have real physical changes without having had the pregnancy. It's like hair loss and all that type of stuff, hormonal shifts. The shock of instant parenthood, right? If there's a compressed timeline. The strains that adoption can place on you, and of course all the good things as well, right? We're not just being negative. It's a really positive, very enlightening interview. You're gonna love this conversation. So without further ado, here we go. What exactly is open adoption?
The open adoption is a wonderful way to build a family and to have a connection with the birth family and the adoptive family so that the child that is shared in common has a healthy start and existence in life, emotionally, spiritually, and obviously all of that plays into their physical well-being as well. Mm-hmm. So it's taking the adoption triad, birth family, adoptive family, and the child, and creating a relationship that is sustaining and encouraging and uplifting for the child.
And how does the process actually work then? Because it sounds like
open adoption. No, well, it doesn't have to be. I mean, the process, of course, is definitely set up to take a little bit of time so they can do vetting. The agencies can do vetting, the social workers, making sure that the person who is adopting is fit in all ways to adopt. But other than that, the process is just filling out paperwork. Obviously, it's making an adoption plan. It's deciding what kind of child do you want to adopt? Is it a boy? Is it a girl? Are you able to take on a child who has disabilities? What race, what gender, ethnicity, all of those things. Is it international or domestic? And so those things are fairly easy to get through. And when it comes to open adoption, it's very important for the adoptive family to be clear about whether they want to go that route, which I suggest everyone should go that route because it just lends itself for a healthier relationship all the way around, not just with the birth family, but also with your child, because open adoption means that there's a exchange of information on both sides, but it also means that you're keeping lines of communication open with your child about how they came into your family, how your family was started, and that there's no shame in how that started, and that it's just another way that God has chosen to start this particular family.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. So you don't have the whole Hollywood style searching for my birth parents,
right?
Type thing at the age of 14 or 18 or whatever.
Or 20 or 30. Yeah. And you can imagine what kind of psychological harm that could do to a child. So my whole coaching business is about, let's cut that off at the pass. Let's start that conversation as early as possible. Obviously, you're only going to talk to the child at a level that they can understand, but you start the conversation early enough so that it's not shameful. It's not something to be hidden or secret, because all of that means regret, shame, and that something's wrong. So we take that out of the equation completely and start from an uplifting place. And from there, if you continue with conversations that are appropriate for the child at that age, and as the other side the birth family become more involved in your life as you permit, then there's a healthy exchange and a healthy growing of that child emotionally, so that we should not have these things. Well, I don't know who I am. I don't know who I look like. I want to know the circumstances of my birth. Those things come out naturally over time as the child gets older.
Right. Because that's a fascinating thing you just said, or at least fascinating to me. It's the when you say, so does the birth family, if they want to, and if the adoptive family wants, of course, do they stay involved in
It's
the
up.
child's life up to a point, of course?
Well, it's all in the hands of the adoptive parent, and the
Right.
adoptive parent will control that.
Mhm.
However, the adoptive parent should, I believe, in the beginning, make it clear that they do want an open relationship, and so should the birth family. And the birth family usually will be the ones to say, I want an open adoption.
Right.
Or I want a closed adoption.
Mhm.
So if the two don't have a meeting of the minds on that subject, then that should not be an adoption that goes forward, because it's going to be either disrupted, which means that it will be canceled by the birth family, or it will be contentious throughout the life of that relationship. So you should always be on the same page as the other party. So if the birth family wants an open adoption, the adoptive family should be open to that. If the adoptive family wants an open adoption, then the birth family should want that as well.
Sure. No, that makes complete sense. So, what kind of background? Because this is like I said, this is different from most of the adoption stories that we see depicted in movies and TV shows and all that sort of stuff. And so what kind of background do most of the open adoptions have? What's
All
because
right.
it sounds different from, like I said, and pardon myself and pardon me, but every listener to this knows I'm a middle-aged white guy, right? It sounds different from the I will travel to whichever foreign country and just end up taking whatever white savior child I can get, if you know what I
Right.
mean. It sounds much more
Yeah.
inclusive.
Well, I mean, private adoption in the States is going to be between an agency and a birth family, an adoptive family, or an attorney, or you can find your own situation where the birth family has come to you, or it could be kinship adoption.
Mhm.
So that's the type of adoption that exists, that's generally going to be open, where there's
Right.
going to be you know who the other side is, and there's an exchange of information, but usually there's a middle person to control the exchange of information, unless you decide, like I did with my child's birth family, that
Mhm.
we were going to not use a middle person like a social worker, and instead communicate with each other. And that's how it started, germanely through text, and then occasional phone calls, and then once a year meeting up. So it could be anything. There's no one adoption that's like the next. There's no one open adoption that's like the next. Some people will choose to have the other side very involved. It really depends on your level of comfort. And at the end of it all, it really is in the hands of the adoptive parent to allow the amount of contact, the frequency of contact, the depth of contact. That's all controlled by the adoptive parent. Now, when we talk about public adoption, that's generally something that is happening with an agency, a city or state agency, where the child is the city or the adoption agency is the guardian of an older child. And usually, sometimes it's a baby. They can be all the way up to 21 when they exit the foster care system.
Yeah.
And those have a more difficult challenge in openness, because many times the birth parents still want to parent the child. And if for whatever reason that's going on in their story, and a judge is involved, and a judge says, I don't see you as being fit to parent this child, I'm going to remove your parental rights, you can imagine that that leads to a lot of contention and bitterness from the birth family side to the newly foster foster to adopt family. So that one needs to be challenged to be managed a little bit more differently for sure and closely.
Yeah, it sounds like the open adoption approach is a lot, like you said, healthier for the child's mental and emotional well-being and all that type of stuff. It sounds like a lot more
Absolutely.
of a healthier approach.
Absolutely. 100%.
So, what effect have you found that adoption? Because it's something that you spoke about on your website and all that sort of stuff about the physical impact of adoption on the female body. Because this was a
Right.
fascinating one for me. Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, and I can speak from personal experience. People think, oh, you just adopt a baby and that's it, and there's no physical challenges that come with it.
Yeah.
But at the very core, you're certainly going to be dealing with sleep deprivation like any other
Yeah.
parent, and that has effects on your body. But there is a chemical that is released in your body where you have to physically, your body has to want to parent that child. It cannot be an emotional void where you're like, okay, I'll just adopt and that's it. No, it's not
Right.
a puppy. It's not it's not a goldfish, right? There is a life that is absolutely depending upon you. Like a dog eventually can find something to eat. A baby is not going to be able to.
Yeah.
And so what I experience is there's a change of hormones. I started seeing my hair falling out and dropping, like women who are physically carry a child. When their hormones start to regulate, a lot of women experience that their hair, the hormones that gave them so much nutrients in their body to have, luscious hair and all of that, it stops. And then you see the dropping of hair. And I experienced that and I couldn't believe it. I was also going through the beginning. I was in perimenopause at the time as well.
Right.
And so, the group of women that I especially work with are in their 40s and 50s. They're single women in their 40s and 50s who have never become mothers because of life circumstances, relationships didn't line up at the right time. Maybe they had fertility issues, whatever it is. They find themselves single and motherless, but want to be mothers. And so at that time period, you're also going through generally perimenopause or menopause. So you have those things to deal with as well. But you're physically, your body is preparing to stop reproducing, but then emotionally, you have a child where your body is telling you you have to produce the hormones to nurture this child. Now, there are some women that can that are in the adoptive phase and they know that they want to lactate and breastfeed. They can do manipulations with their breasts with tools to get their milk flowing. So that's one way. I did not do that. I also chose not to take any kind of drugs that would make me lactate. I just didn't find that to be healthy, but those are also things that people who are going through adoption can do. But for me, it was, I definitely saw the hair dropping and that came back, thankfully. Obviously sleep deprivation, and really managing what it means to be a mother overnight. Sometimes it can be quite instantaneous. So you have to adjust your lifestyle now to accommodate a child that you didn't have, maybe even you didn't even have it in your body 24 hours ago.
And all of a sudden
so
it's there. Yeah.
It's there, right? And it can be that quick that it happens because you can get a call from a hospital saying, there's a mother who has decided to choose adoption. Are you open to raising this child? So it can be overnight. And I have clients that has happened to, and it is a quite an adjustment.
Yeah, I'm sure. having a settling in period, so to speak, or just going from decision made, as in this is something you might want to consider doing, or this is something you want to do, to going to full on, and there it is quite
Right.
it's quite a shock to the system.
Absolutely. Quite a shock to the system, quite a shock to your lifestyle. You have to now plan for uh, babysitters and
Mhm.
set up the rooms. There's all sorts of things that happen at a much faster timeline. Whereas with pregnancy, obviously, you have 9 months to prepare for
Yeah.
this. With adoption, you have a few months to mentally prepare, perhaps, or just a few days.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that I suppose that you have time to mentally prepare, but that doesn't mean you're actually prepared for the for the thing. You
Absolutely.
just think you are, and you've done the best you could. But there's a
Absolutely.
big difference. So how do you find that? How do you help women and men and just couples in general go through that process of
Yeah.
here you are now. Here's a new presence in your life, and like you said, slightly tougher, probably slightly tougher than getting a puppy. But but it's and this is how you best deal with it, considering especially that that you're going to have all these conversations anyways, and prepare for future questions and a new relationship with the birth parents and all that type of thing.
Yeah, well, it starts very slowly. It
Hmm.
starts with conversation. It's interesting. I focus on women, as I said, single women, but more and more, I'm getting people outside of my demographic. I'm getting couples.
Hmm.
I just had a conversation with a guy who's in his 50s and he wants to be a father
Right.
and he's in a relationship. And, it was I've had two conversations like that with men, and each time I'm like, wow, I love that men also have this desire to parent, to be
Hmm.
a father, just
Sure.
like women have this desire to be a mother, and that they can express in their 40s and 50s. I really wish that I had had a child
Hmm.
sooner, earlier, or even that I will have one.
Hmm.
So that I think I hope that with the work that I'm doing, that it gives permission to people to speak their truth and to speak their desires, the desires of their heart. Because once you do that, then we can have real conversations about, okay, what does that mean? How are you going to make this happen in your life? Do you have support? Do you have people who can help you? Do you need to change your job
Hmm.
because your job keeps you working 60 hours a week? Are you able financially to go this route? There are all sorts of questions to ask. And I actually start people with a questionnaire that it's on my website. And I always say there's no right or wrong answers. It's just a way to start the conversation with yourself first. Is this something that you really want? Is this a burning desire? For me, I knew that it was the one thing that I would regret not having experienced in my life when
Right.
I passed away, that
Hmm.
I needed to have this happen. And so it started with going the fertility route, which did not work for me. It was very, very costly.
Hmm.
I think costly financially and also costly health wise, because
Yeah.
I experienced fibroids after that. And I think it
Hmm.
was because of the massive doses of hormone that I had to take because I was in my 40s already
Hmm.
and my fertility was already diminishing. It's those conversations that I have with people that say, you know, if you're going to go the fertility route, I need you to have a really good conversation with your doctor about the chances that this will work,
Hmm.
because it's going to be really costly, like I said, financially and on your body, and no one knows the long-term tolls on that.
Hmm.
Um, and then if that's not the way you want to go, then let's consider adoption. And you may want a brand new baby, or you may want a toddler. Or your lifestyle says that, you know what, I think I'll be better with a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And so it's it's those kind of conversations that I start people having, and then we move on from there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think you're absolutely right. There is a whole the discussion around IVF and all that type of stuff is nowhere near honest enough. At least not in the
Absolutely.
UK. It's I have several clients who've conceived through IVF, and they will. I worked for them through IVF and then postpartum and all that type of stuff, and it is brutal. It's a lot more difficult than people think it is. People
Absolutely.
tend to think, you get some treatment from a doctor and everything goes into a little dish and then whoop, and 9 months later,
Right.
and like you said, it fails more often than it works, right? A lot of the time, I think
Yes.
in the UK, everybody through the NHS gets free IVF cycles, free if you don't have kids yet.
Wow.
But the requirement is 7 or 8. The last I heard, and someone can email in and correct me if I'm wrong, but it was 7 or 8. So you can imagine 3 isn't necessarily enough, and 3
All
is
right.
already brutal, and it's a prolonged period of time where you're artificially kind of messing with hormone levels and all that type of stuff. And like you said, there are definitely side effects to
Absolutely.
IVF. And it
Before
makes
you go
sense.
to the next question, I was
Yeah,
going
sure.
to say, it reminds me of that time when I was going through the process. And I just really wish that women were honest about how they became mothers. It was a time where people were very, oh yeah, I conceived her naturally. And
Mhm.
you're like 45, 50. You're like, really? Wow. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
and that's not helpful to anyone if that's not the truth.
yeah.
Because then it leads other women to go, okay, well, she did it and she went the fertility
Mhm.
route. I can do it, when that wasn't the truth from the beginning. And if you had told the truth and been truthful about your experience, you would have empowered that next person to make a better and more informed choice about how they become a mother. And so that, again, is the work that I
Sure.
do. And as you said, fertility, I have realized, is an if. I went through 5 IUIs and
Right.
2 IVF treatments.
Mhm.
It's an if you're going to
Yeah,
become a mother.
yeah.
Adoption is a when.
Yeah, true. That's a good point. That's a very good point. And you raised a very, very important point there. I think a lot of the conversations that I have with people and on the podcast and it's about not everything to do with babies is unicorns and rainbows, right? And
Right.
it's and it's really difficult, and I understand it's difficult for someone who's had a child through IVF to say it was brutal, but it was worth it, or it was brutal and I don't know if I did the right thing. But it's brutal bit usually gets shoved to the side a little bit because you're told that you have to be happy, right?
Right.
When you have to be happy, and therefore nothing that came before can be seen as having been difficult. And I've had conversations with people before where I introduced with one of my clients said, I'm considering IVF. Do you have clients that have IVF, have been through IVF? Can you introduce me to them so I can have a conversation what it's really like? And I have to go to the other person and say, just be honest about what you actually went through, because that's what they're
Absolutely.
asking about, rather than go, oh, your baby's so cute. Well, that's convinced me to try the same thing, right? Because let's be
Right.
honest, if you're wanting to have a baby, then all babies are cute. It doesn't really matter
Right.
how you ended up with one. So
And to that point, yeah, I mean, I didn't need to see my genes replicated, right? So that was easier for me to make a decision about going the adoption route. I know there are people still to this day that are like, I want a child so badly, but my husband won't allow us to adopt because it's not his. And it's like, that is so, and in a sense, I'm like, okay, I'm glad you're not adopting a child because it's the wrong mindset, but it's so ego driven that you can only love a child that physically comes from your body in one shape or form. And it's also ego driven for society to say that you are less than, that you did not physically birth a child or father a child because of whatever is going on. A lot of it is genetic because of environment now, right? It's not something. Why is there blame about not being able to physically produce a child, in one way or shape or form? It's an insanity socially that needs to end.
And you're quite right. It reminded me of this bit, and I haven't seen the entire special, so I'm not sure it's any good. Chelsea Handler, the comedian, did a thing on this. where she explained where her brother was wanting a child because it's his legacy and that sort of
Right.
thing. And she's like, oh, dude, you're a bus driver or whatever he is.
Mhm.
She said, your legacy is being my brother. Right? Do you
Absolutely.
know what I mean? It makes no, it adds nothing to the legacy of the person. It doesn't, it's not in the grand scheme of things within nature. It's not that special that you're able to make a mini version of yourself.
Absolutely.
And I think you're quite right that there's a really weird. And I'm thinking you're right in that it's probably more a male driven thing, as in it has to look like me because
Right.
I'm so amazing. Let's make another version of myself, right? That's a very it sounds paternalistic almost.
Right. But we
But
don't know much of what's in our genealogy beyond what we could find written somewhere, right?
yeah.
Beyond that, we don't know where we started from, what country where our great parents moved to, and they
Mhm.
really, maybe they were adopted or
Yeah.
illegitimately conceived. We don't know
Yeah.
that. So we get caught up on these things of, I'm like Scottish, I'm American, I'm this in
Mhm.
generation. I can go back generations. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Right now,
Mhm.
right here, you have the opportunity to change your life and welcome them into your family that
Mhm.
hopefully is healthy emotionally and where they can thrive and grow. And they will be your child. They are your
Yeah.
child. And it is something that we see in Judeo-Christian and even Islamic culture,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Oh,
Adoption was
absolutely. Yeah.
throughout all the
Mhm.
stories,
Yeah.
even Jesus adopted by Joseph. So
Mhm.
adoption is something that is so germane to our who we are as people. And again, the work that I do is to take the
Mhm.
stigmatization out of it and say this is as normal as having your naturally born child.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. So what sort of self doubt? Because I'm thinking there would be a lot of people listening to this and say, yeah, okay, this all makes sense, but I still have some level of self doubt. Do you find most of the self doubt actually comes from external pressures, or just the way we were raised, the way we were taught by society how to think of adoption and all that sort of thing?
I think there are different doubts, right? So there's a
Mhm.
doubt of, is adoption safe? Am I going to get a child who's going to murder me in the middle of the night? You know,
Yeah.
is adoption, am I going to fight with the birth family all the time?
Mhm.
And that's not to say that those situations don't happen, but it also is informed by what we are programmed with on TV and
Yeah.
movies and all of those things, right? The really bad stories always get the light, and
Sure.
the thousands of good ones, just go about. They don't get highlighted. So that's part of the problem is what comes to light, what's newsworthy. And then I think there are realistic doubts about, okay, I'm single, I don't have a whole lot of support, can I do this? And in my situation, I started the process. My mother had just passed away, and for adoption anyway. I had been trying through IVF
Mhm.
while she was alive, but I didn't have a mother and a father who I could lean on for support. And as only child, there that those are legitimate concerns about, oh my
Sure.
gosh, can I do this? But what I found is that I had a whole community of people who were ready to step up and help me along the way. And so
Right.
what I do as an open adoption success coach is also create community so that you have people who are walking the same path that you are on the same journey, and you have more than what I had, which is very little. I didn't have a playbook. I had to make things up as I went along. I had to create this relationship that I wanted my daughter to have with her birth family. I didn't have that modeled anywhere. So if I can show how I have built this life within adoption and with a birth family and with my daughter and
Mhm.
how she's thriving, um, and that allows other people to go, okay, now I see a real life person doing it. And I'm not sugarcoating anything. I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that my journey as a single mother has been easy. It has not been. There have been ups, there have been downs, but at the core, I have a child that fulfills me, that I know that I am parenting the right way. And I also am looking not to remain single my whole life. I'm also looking for a partner, a life partner, as my husband and as her father. And so what I say to my single women clients is that don't worry, you're not going to be single all the time for the rest of your life. This won't be your job to do by yourself forever until the child is grown. And it's interesting, Peter, that's actually what the birth family told the social worker about me. I was the only single woman presented to them to choose from. And there were couples, and they looked at my brochure and said, and the social worker told them that I was single. And my daughter's birth mother said, oh, but she won't be single forever. She'll find a husband. And so that's the reality, right? And it's that you're not going to be doing this by yourself, and change is good. You know, the road rises up to meet you if you decide to go that path. And I love the work that I do because it's so fulfilling when I can see clients with their child. And it's rough at the beginning, right? It's a huge adjustment in so many ways, but you have at your core that great desire fulfilled and this lovely little child that's looking to you and saying, Mama.
Yes, and it's something that you said there. I mean, you know, it's because it kind of comes back to that unicorns and rainbows thing. Having a child naturally, as in giving birth to one, is also not going to be easy. It's also always a struggle, right?
Right.
I have never come across anyone that had like a 10-year-old to this previously 10-year-old that said, oh no, everything was piece of piss till now. Right? Everything was just piece of pie. It was dead easy.
Right.
From giving birth till 10 years old, never a problem. Right. So it is, and indeed, like you said, with regards to relationship status and all that sort of thing, these things, well, they can always fluctuate, can't they? You can't.
Absolutely.
I suppose, do you come across that a lot, especially when you say you're working a lot with single women and all that sort of stuff? Do you come across that a lot? That a lot of them have well, maybe I better wait sort of self-doubt.
Sometimes, but I say, well, you're 40 or 50. There's not much more time to wait. Like this is it. You just like do or die. Let's do this now. Why wait? What is going to change? And that is actually what informed me being like 46 when my daughter was born, because I was waiting, right? In my 30s, I'm like waiting and waiting for the right relationship. And then you date somebody and then it's not the right one and it goes off track and you try to date someone else. And, then, there are the people who they got tired of waiting and they just chose a person who could be a sperm donor of sorts, and they got married and that marriage is long over. Or they're in a relationship that they wish, they're like, oh my gosh, I have to be parenting with this person for 18 years and I can't stand them, but we share a child in common. Right. And so I think if you're single in your 40s and 50s, that came about in a certain way. And so, and with decisiveness, probably. So it's more about, okay, so I am ready to have this child in my life and I can build a life around them with the right guidance. I can't do it by myself. I don't know how to start this, but it's not impossible. And I need to find someone who can help guide me through the process. And so I think if you have this huge burning desire to become a parent, don't wait. There is a time, the conversation I had recently with the guy who was 50, he said, I'm wondering if it's too late for me, I'm going to be too old? I'm like, how long will I have with my child? And the reality is we don't know how long we have any of us have with our child.
Yeah, true.
Right. Even if we birth them naturally or father them naturally, we just have no idea when God calls us home.
True.
So live now, live for now.
And especially when you consider like old guys like Mick Jagger and all those sort of type. we all know the guys, right? Well, they have kids in their 70s and their 80s and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So, they're not giving it any consideration. Although you can doubt whether it's actually their child. But
and we don't know if they're really parenting.
No, exactly. But they've probably outsourced all that type of stuff.
Right.
But fundamentally, you're right. It's everybody accepts, because everybody kind of expects life to have a natural progression, right? As in, I won't die till I'm 80 because that's the average life expectancy, right? That bus that hits some people with the heart attack that hits some people at the age of 50 definitely won't happen to me, and therefore. And all of a sudden that doubt kind of sets in when you're 50, when you're like, oh, can I still throw a ball with my kid? To use very American sort of description there, can I still throw a baseball with my kid when he's 16 and I'm in my 60s? Right? It's I suppose that idea of just make a decision one way or another. Don't procrastinate on it too long. That's a very powerful message there.
Right. Time is now.
Yeah, for sure. So how do people actually get it started then? I know obviously on your website there will be a ton of information and all that sort of stuff. Is that where we're starting with that? Okay, let's start with a self-reflection guide, see where we actually are, and then how to progress from there.
Yes. And then they would book a call with me and we can go over what they've answered. Again, no right or wrong answers.
Sure.
And to get started, you need to start interviewing agencies, figuring out if you want to go the private adoption route or the foster care route. Foster care has its own concerns, and but it is less expensive by a mile. Right. And there are some benefits that they make available to parents so that they will go through with it, as far as like paying for insurance, paying for healthcare, paying for schooling up through 21, and the stipend that you're not going to get in a private adoption. Private adoption, you're going to be paying, upward anywhere from 25 to 50 to 60, even more, depending on if it's domestic or international. And you want to find out if the agency is open to single parents. And I have a list of agencies that are, and countries as well. You want to make sure that they are going to give you the kind of support that you need. I'm not an agency. I'm just a coach that helps. Yeah, sure. I shouldn't say just. I'm the coach that helps you navigate that and help you with selection and managing things, avoiding the pitfalls that I went through. Like I contracted with an agency, and my child came from another agency, my social worker, actually. Right. And the first agency refused to give me back my money. And so, there are ways to avoid that happening that I've learned. And that's what I help my clients with as well. And then you have just the basic paperwork that needs to be done, right? You need to do fingerprinting locally. That also gets sent down to DC. Here in the States for Homeland Security. Of course. But, the biggest thing I want to say, especially since you are based in the UK, and I've also talked to podcasters in India, and this is not a US kind of initiative, right? Open adoption is international, the need for it, right? To connect people to their source and to let them understand who they are, the circumstances of their birth, good, bad, or indifferent. They come, we have to empower people, children emotionally to handle difficult conversations, but it doesn't mean that they're any less loved. And you reinforce their potential negative stories, start beginning stories with positivity in how they are in your family and how they impact the love of your family. So, as professional women around the world, get older, we are the women in their 40s and 50s, or I should say women generally, the more education you have, the later in life you are thinking about having a child, or you might find yourself, oh my goodness, how did I become 40? When did that happen?
That
As I
happens
was
to all
building
of
this
us.
career, right? And then you realize, oh shoot, I don't have what I want in my life.
Yeah.
So, this is certainly a conversation that affects so many around the world. And, what is it that you want to do now that you realize you're in a situation that was not how you dreamt or imagined your life to be?
Mhm.
So now is the time to change it. Take control.
Yeah, no, absolutely. On that, very on those happy, positive words. I'll just say, was it, because we touched on quite a lot, and I know our time is short. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on? Because I think we covered a lot.
Oh, goodness. Well, I am just so grateful to have this conversation, to see that it's touching so many people around the world,
Mhm.
and to get a chance to even speak to and be heard by your listeners around the world. Because again, there are so many children in need.
Mhm.
There are so many children who are affected by or being orphans, as children of war,
Mhm.
and people who want to do harm to children in other ways that just are unspeakable. So if we can find people who have a heart to love and raise children to be healthy adults, please step forward. It is something that is so needed. I lost my mother 11 years ago, and yesterday on the
Mhm.
11th, and it resonates with me because I remember someone at the funeral who, for all good intentions, how some things just blurt out and you didn't really mean to say it. And she said, "Oh, Ayo, you're an orphan now." And I thought, well, that's a really strange thing to say to somebody at this
Yeah.
time. And I'm like, I'm not an orphan. I know who my parents are, and they loved me, and I had a great
Mhm.
relationship with them. And I'm an adult. How can I be an orphan?
Mhm.
But, over the years, I'm like, you know what? There are times where I have felt that.
Yeah.
And I can imagine what it feels like to be a child without a home and a loving family to really pour into them. And, women especially, we're vessels. We are
Mhm.
vessels. We hold love. We hold the ability to produce children. And men are absolutely needed in the home and the raising of children. So if we can have men and women have real conversations about the importance of family versus the importance of career
Mhm.
to the detriment of family, then I think we'll be a society that is better off.
Well, absolutely. I could not agree more. And on that happy note, I will press stop record here. And press stop record is exactly what I did. Thanks very much, Ayo, for coming on. But that was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot from that, to be honest. I, for instance, didn't know that there were. Obviously, I knew there would be sleepless nights and all that type of stuff, but you can have real the physical effects after adoption that you kind of get that you would get after having been pregnant and gone through labor as well. That was a thing. Obviously, all the pressures. I mean, everybody who's ever gone for any major life changes knows that will bring mental health has a mental health impact somewhere. So thanks very much to Ayo for coming on. Ayo's created this thing, this like call to action type, like questionnaires, a questionnaire designed to help single women explore if motherhood through adoption is right for them. So I will link to that because it's really it's quite valuable. It's basically gives you a chance to think about your thoughts, ideas, and feelings, where you are, what you want, and all that type of stuff, and whether adoption actually is something for you, whether it's worth considering, and all that type of stuff. So I will link to that. It's definitely worth checking out. Next week, what am I doing next week? That is the question. That is a question on everybody's lips. What are we doing next week? And homeschooling next week. You gotta love that. Homeschooling with Lindsay. That was a phenomenal conversation. I learned more about homeschooling I'm getting educated here, people. I learned more about homeschooling in that conversation than I turned out I knew nothing about homeschooling, right? You're going to love that. So that'll be next week. For now, peter@healthypostnatalbody.com. If you have any questions or comments, send us a text, whatever it is. However you want to get in touch, just get in touch. For whatever reason you want to get in touch. Anyways, you take care of yourself. Here's a new bit of music. Right? Bye now.
You think you understand me. You think you have an inside point of view. You think that you command me. You think I'm gonna hate to break it to you. I don't care what you say. I'll do it anyway. Anyway, I'll do it anyway. Do it anyway. Do it anyway. Do it anyway. Walking on a high line, eyes on me, I'm automatic. I'm tripping on the live wires. Sound the alarm just to be dramatic. I don't care what you say. I'll do it anyway. Anyway, I'll do it anyway. I'll take this way too far. I break the stars. I'm kicking down the door. Take the floor.